pieces. My piece is about it will be online, but later on. June now.
It witnesses a lot of shipwrecks, over the centuries. Trade, maritime, sea so close. Many ceramics was from China. It's actually an entry point to Europe, North Africa, certainly within South Asia. It's really interesting because I'm fascinated by art. Yes.
I will mention it for everyone.
Right. Yeah, very important artist.
That's great. You have a picture.
Yeah, we can do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, welcome everyone to Lingnan University Department of Digital Arts and Creative Industries sessions of master classes. And we are very honored today to have Professor Gabriel G. And I will be giving a brief introduction. We have such an interesting topic today that is really highly needed at this moment. We're really in short of embodied experience. So we're very privileged to hear from Professor G. Professor G is an art historian, writer, and curator based in Switzerland. He joined Franklin University in 2011, where he teaches contemporary art history and theory. His research interests include the arts of port cities, interconnected global histories, and contemporary artistic research. He edited with Caroline Wedmer a volume on maritime poetics published by the Transcript Press in 2021. He is the initiator and co-founder of the interdisciplinary study group TETI, Textures and Experiences of Trans-Industriality, active through workshops, exhibitions, culinary events, and through a press, which recently launched a journal available online and in print. TETI Journal #1 looked at trans-industriality in 2024, and the journal #2, published in 2025, explores the topic of hybrid marines. I think that is a very thought-provoking research topic, and we are very honored to have Dr. G with us. Yeah, let's welcome.
Hello everyone. Can you hear me okay? I have to check the back as well. Is this? Is there any sound coming from this mic? I am. Yeah. You just have to be really close to it. Just switch it on is better. Hello everyone. Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Many thanks to the Master of Art Curating and Art History for the invitation, and thank you to Professor Dr. Hélène Kwok and to Emilie for having me. Thanks to Lemon as well for organizing my visit, and it's a pleasure to meet you all today. I was there last summer talking about gardens, and this time I will talk more about food. I apologize for arriving a bit late on the scene. Originally, I was going to start by talking about maritime stories and spaces, which is a little bit where I come from. Disruptions are outside of my control due to the difficulties more than difficulties, events in in geopolitics, maybe I arrived a bit late on this part of the world. So maybe as a forward, I should say that this project on culinary matters is a little bit, I mean, for me personally, if you, in a way, a sort of an offshoot of my interest into maritime spaces and closely connected to it. So, and also it's kind of more, I'm still working very much on maritime stories and spaces, but this one is a little bit more not experimental, but as in construction. So so I've tried to give you an idea of things that I've been doing, but we've been doing with my little group TETI for Textures and Experience of Transindustriality. But I'll be also very curious to see what you think, and maybe to point me in to give me some suggestions, particularly because what I'm currently interested in, and the reason why I'm also with you in this part of the world today is that I'm looking at coastal cookings across the South China Sea. So I'm going to be traveling a little bit again in the coming month, and so if you have any tips or practical or theoretical, indeed, I'll be very interested in hearing about those. What else would I want to say just as a forward? Yes, no, I think that's the idea. So I'll just jump right into it with a little bit of an introduction, and to let you know a little bit how I constructed today's presentation. Dialogues between culinary and contemporary art practices and contemporary art practices have surged in past decades in parallel to a growing interest in environmental transformations and identity seen through the prism of food ecologies. And I suppose that links a little bit to what we were, I think I recognize a few faces here as well, we were talking about last summer related to garden. Food, in many ways, allows for a reflection on processes of cultural development into the distribution and organization of social roles, of community, of gender, as well as an investigation to the management of resources, the representation of natural and social habitats. On a more specific note, this talk aims to reflect on an interplay between arts and the culinary, with a particular emphasis on coastal spaces, it's in the title here, coastal cooking, and maritime encounters, as they come to channel history of taste and migration of embodied experience, as Professor Wang mentioned in her kind introduction, evident in culinary traditions and cultures. My current research project, which I started over a year ago, aims to explore art and food practices across the South China Sea. Therefore, in dialogue with maritime histories and spaces, I would have talked about more yesterday. It is posited at the junction of art history, art and artistic research, so work by and in an artist mindset, drawing from a multifolded practice developed over the past few years at the research group TETI, combining investigative research on site, oral history, culinary iterations involving collective dialogue and encounters, storytelling, poem objects, and a little bit of video production. And I will try to refer to some of our past project as some example in this afternoon. You have one right here in the picture I chose for as an opening, which were called. Well, the title was Boucher Mobile Soil. So Boucher in French is a little. I don't know, not dim sums, but little snacks. Mobile Soils, which refers to the book we published that year in 21, and we were sort of presenting the book in an edible form. I'll give you another example of that, and this was happening in La Bec, which is a very nice artist residency project in Vevey, which is near Lausanne in Switzerland. In this presentation, I will aim to present some of his working projects while taking steps at the same time to the side to draw from references and developments from the art world and art histories related to art and culinary practices, which I hope will be of interest to you as part of a master, as well as our colleagues, which I forgot to say hi to, who are joining us from Taiwan. So hello to everyone there as well. The culinary in food is present from times almost immemorial in the production of art. Although as a practice, cooking, and as an occupation, eating, it has often been seen as less commendable. They have often been seen as less commendable activities in relation to a hierarchy of senses, whereby viewing and hearing were deemed more attuned to higher spiritual realms, name your favorite, of thought, poetry, religion, than the bodily needs that taste was directly associated with. The surge in art practices exploring the medium of the culinary in recent decades reveals in many ways a contestation as to the principles of this hierarchy of senses, as well as the changes in our society's imaginaries, which artists articulate in various forms we can touch upon today. In revisiting the place and role of the body, of taste, in an opening to art to new forms of inquiry into our trans-industrial environments. And with regards to trans-industrial, I'm not going to launch myself into that, but the first issue of TETI Journal #1, which focuses specifically, which looks as an invitation to a number of folks to engage with this idea of trans-industriality, which I coined about, 20 years ago or something now, has various takes on it. So, and this one is already online and in open access. So if you go to TETI Group, you can follow the press, and if you follow the journal, you'll find the first issue there. The different articles are already available. As well as a reflection on collaboration, on social organization, past and present, and its discontents, on practices of hospitality, of care, and ultimately in the terms with which our narratives in the global or indeed planetary age are constructed. I will follow a route that takes us from fields and the sea that surrounds the coast to the market, the kitchen, the cookbook, and the recipes needed to cook the meal and the meal itself. In the end, I will ask you to maybe, if you wish, play with me in writing your own recipe. So let's see how we get there. As a forward, a little bit, I mean, as I said, coastal cooking revolves around the coast, but the coast, of course, is in between land and sea. The coast encloses the sea, or the sea encloses the coast. And I just wanted to say a few words around the sea, which is a really important aspect, of course, of the coastal entities. And I'm referring briefly to the work of the 19th century historian Jules Michelet, who wrote a very very fascinating book on the sea. Quote from Michelet: "The imaginative Orientals see it only and call it only as the night of the depths," the sea, it means. "In all the antique tongues from India to Ireland, the synonymous or analogous name of the sea is either night or desert." End of quote. This parallel between the sea and the desert, I think, points to a significant character of oceanic and maritime expanses. It's a point that's been looked at more recently by Gaël Tallet and Thierry Sozo in an edited volume on the sea and the desert from antiquity to the present. They point out, you have a couple of quotes here, this relation between the seas and desert. That characterize, the quote, "The connection between the sea and the desert therefore lies above all in the indeterminacy that characterizes these marginal spaces and the desire to cross them and to make them one's own." They point out that similar tools and techniques are needed to navigate space: astrolabes, stars, days of sailing, of walking, and similar questions regarding food supply that take place at sea and the desert. I quote, "Practical problems are common to both types of navigation, such as the supply of drinking water, transporting water reserves, storing jars underground, etc. The use of hardy animals such as camels and caravans is echoed in techniques used to collect dew during long voyages, etc., etc. The point being that technological, scientific, and human challenges, which leads to the development of networks, archipelagos, in which the island and the oasis, and we would add, I would add here, the port, become recipients of population settlements and migrations. In the context of the Mediterranean Sea, this parallel between sea and desert goes back to antiquity, offers in the antiquity, and after, but going back to modern times, after Michelet, the French historian Fernand Braudel, B-R-A-U-D-E-L, also dedicated some attention to their similarities in his celebrated studies, entitled "On the Mediterranean Space at the Time of Philip II." This is in the early modern age, and maybe going to the point that maybe interests me and us, I think today, scholars have coined the term connectivity to describe the textures of networks and circulations between hyper-connected micro-regions. And he's talking really about, he's thinking about the Mediterranean, but with Francis Gipoulou, you have his text, his book here, The Asian Mediterranean, another French historian. We can consider the equivalent rise of such connectivity across the South China Sea, which he explored in his port cities and trading networks in China, Japan, and Southeast Asia, in which equivalent socioeconomic development can be seen. And this parallel is important in its relation to present understanding of global interconnections, in that the Mediterranean was theorized as an ancient crucible of the économie monde, the world economy. It's often quoted in French when referring precisely to this idea that Braudel developed. That you have a system of economic system and cultural system that emerges around the Mediterranean and that becomes global. And in a way, the argument that Gipoulou makes is that actually there are parallel or counterexample, and the South China Sea being one of them. And I've put a couple of other references here. You see John Chaffee on looking particularly at Muslim merchants. You have some images from Trondheim, which I visited last year, where on the bottom side there's still that's the old mosque, and the wonderful book by John Miskish on Singapore and the Silk Road of the sea. From the vantage point of the harbor, though, from a coastal point, in the early modern age, in the perspective of global commerce, the sea becomes a surface on which the transportation of goods takes place, a series of roads, more or less visible and maintained. And I put here a quote from Matteo Vegetti in a publication edited by Paolo Perulli called Terram Mobile, in which he points to the turn towards an abstract conceptualization of the sea that occurs with the development of global maritime routes in the early modern age. And I quote, "At the source of a Western technico-industrial development, there is an image of the world, and it is only through this vision of the inland as a pure coast, a mere point of anchorage in a deterritorialized empire made of lines of communication and ports, diffused in a fragmentary manner on all continents, that the period of free global commerce explode." End of commerce. So that's the idea of the sea as a sort of motorway, basically. And we could, of course, oppose to it a vision that underlines the perspective of depth. And particularly, given our interests, the fishing traditions, and in the modern age industries. Fishing can take place in a day, yes, taking the boat from the village to the sea and back, or over months, which is the object, an example here of a novel, Fishers from Iceland, by Pierre Loti, which is not a book really about Icelandic fishermen, well, that's really interesting, but really of fishermen from Brittany in France, who used to go on very long month journey, half-a-year journeys to fish in the Arctic, that were because fish was there was a lot of catch that could be got here. And I put on the right-hand side a more contemporary example by the artist, the Taiwanese artist Hu Lu, Squid Jigging Fishing Boat, which is a documentary he made on Taiwanese fishermen that go also quite long journey to get to fish squid, going as far as South America to bring back the catch. And on this question of depth, perhaps the one thing that we could add, but I will touch on it in a second, is that you could also link it to the oceanic turn. So maybe thinking of also a non-human maritime expenses and the life of the ocean, as opposed to a sort of mere road on which to carry goods. So, moving from out for the sea, but keeping it in mind, we go to the shore. And if I have underlined in the most advanced forms of modern connectivity, the extent to which the coast becomes a mere abstract point, we can also consider the way that throughout humanity, it was, on the contrary, to quote from historian John Gillis in his Human Shore, a very lived space. Let's read this quote together. From what we know from recent archaeology, the coastal foragers enjoy what Marshall Salins famously called Stone Age affluence, advanced by access to a range of resources greater than those of any other geography. While coastal and lakeside wetlands are perhaps the most biodiverse and productive of all Earth's places, they vary widely in fertility. Peat bogs yield a source of fuel but are infertile, and not all shores are as rich in seafood as those temperate coasts blessed by upwellings or rapid currents, which provide the most favorable environments for all forms of marine life. It is clear that coastal waters were far more productive than the deep oceans, and the richest place of all were the temperate intertidal zones and estuaries, which produced as much as 10 times the biomass of coasts in general. Of particular importance in the early millennia were the shellfish that appeared at each low tide. End of quote. And John Gillis kind of launched a sort of a branch of history, the coastal history, which is really, really interesting and inspiring to many people, including us here in art history. To give you maybe also an example that I think connects those two, I point to the Korean collective Ikibawikri, or they're always very tricky to mention. I think they're quite proud of them. I had the chance to interview them a couple of years ago. There's an interview with them actually on the TETI website if you want to know more about them on their project Tropical Stories. They did a lot of work on Jeju Island. I don't know if some of you have been there in the past, but it's a I think it's a place where nowadays you go to have a good time and it's to enjoy the sun. But it has quite a troubled history, and they did a lot of work on those kind of on this troubled history. But this project that you see here is Diving is with Companion, is the title, is about the very quite ancient practice of women divers who dive to fish and to feed their families from Jeju Island. And the title goes basically, you always dive in pair, just for safety reasons. So that's an interesting also way of this kind of artists engaging with this coastal fertility, you could say. I think this was after coming here last year. I also had the chance to visit Jinmen, just off the Xiamen coast, and I was looking at all ancient oyster farming, which people there tell me dates back to the 15th, 16th century, and I think maybe this is something that, of course, you can extend to the southern Fujian traditions, coast more generally. Salt farming as well, which they keep more as heritage there in Jinmen. It's not really used as such. There's a little salt museum that you can visit, but obviously salt's quite an important aspect of this coastal components. What you see, and let me not get into the lighthouse that you see here. I think this is the oldest that you have in Jinmen, which is from the 14th century, I think. But more generally, what it points to here are the fields. And I start a little bit with going from the sea towards the hinterland of the coast and these fields to tell you a little bit about the project called Curated Nature that we developed a couple of years ago. You can see on a white cube a plinth of salt, and there is a salad. Next to it, there is a bowl filled with coal. And this we called Anne-Laure Franchette and myself, doing a TETI project between Shanghai and Hangzhou, curated nature. We were visiting for 2 weeks a number of places, from the port cities to the hinterland, and made a number of pieces, 8 pieces at the end. And I'm gonna refer to this tour as I go along. We were exploring basically the relation to nature in localized environments. The tour brought a number of participants to on-site visits and encounters with farmers, entrepreneurs, governmental representatives. So we had the chance to meet quite a number of people. This piece referred to a number of our encounters. It also refers or notes to art historical references, a form of intervisuality or intertextuality. The one that was most obvious to my mind was the one that you have on the right-hand side, which is by Giovanni Anselmo, called entitled Sculpture That Eats. It's an artist who is associated with the arte povera movement, so working with poor materials. But I realized also that I should have in mind the work of Alison Knowles, which is also particularly relevant here. An artist make a salad. This is the photograph I found. This one I found is for a later edition of the piece, but the original work is from 1962, and it involved getting a lot of salad and putting it together and tossing it around like that. There was a bit of a script. This Alison Knowles is an artist. I don't know if maybe you have encountered her work in the past before with Fluxus, and the sort of international art movement has artists in many countries, and Fluxus, for us, I think for today, placed an emphasis on an embodied experience of the world. And they used, there were quite a lot of musicians in Fluxus, so they also used this like kind of minimal scores, like poems. Think John Cage. John Cage was associated with Fluxus in many ways. So this is a little bit what we have here, and our curated nature could hark back to. We did during the tour also get to visit a number of places. It was we had a number of artists, architects, engineers looking at the countryside here, just outside of Shanghai. I mean, Shanghai is huge, of course, but we not too far from Pudong Airport and from this huge motorway of shipping containers that goes just around the corner. But there, it's almost like, very bucolic, and this family is growing peaches and raisins, and we sort of a little bit out of time somehow. Although the guy who was in there was really a real entrepreneur, and he was doing quite well. But the day after that, we were in not too far away, another suburbs of Shanghai, in a vertical farm. It was in a warehouse, and it could be any warehouse. It's almost like a mine, you could say, to look at soil-less vertical farming, watered and monitored by automated machinery. And the manager who gave a tour of the brand new facilities pointed to the addition of competences that enable the implementation of such advanced technology. And specifically, it was kind of struck me when he was talking about technology, he was saying, well, everything you see here is Japanese. It's all Japanese high tech. I was like, okay, because I thought, I came a little bit equipped, so I read that in China there's a lot of interesting machinery that is developed, but no, he was like, no, it's Japanese stuff here. And the others that are quite good at that are, of course, the Dutch, who have developed quite a lot of automated farming. I mean, but you could see that they've done that a little bit from a long time ago, which is why I'm showing you this still life here by Peter Kleitz from on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, most likely there, you have a more recent catalogue from an exhibition from 2008, Nature as Artifice. And you could say, if you look at maps from the 16th and the 16th to 18th century of Holland, you see this conquest of the land of a the sea, with land level being lower than the sea. I mean, perhaps the equivalent on this part might be to think about Singapore and its expansion as well. But let's not go into that. From the fields, of course, we could go. I mean, I called it warehouses and entrepot. I thought it was. I could have added baskets. You know, suppose we have a basket that you use to bring the food to the market or back home. But warehouses, I think, are quite important, interesting, very important, particularly in Shanghai. In Guangzhou, of course, I picked up one of the Hong Kong, one of your local collections here. This wonderful collection of the so-called China trade paintings, often anonymous, depicting the warehouses in Guangzhou, I added entrepot, having glanced, having read part of it, because I ordered it through Oxford a month ago. But it, the post between Britain and the European continent is quite slow since 2016. So it only got there like 2 days ago. So in that way, missing my first flight. Well, missing, I didn't miss it, but enabled me to cast a glance at Professor Yue's latest book. Congratulations to her, and particularly to the last chapter, which is specifically in the colonial screen on this notion of the entrepot, and as characterizing also the history of Hong Kong. The other references that you see here, I mentioned, are quite interesting. The anthropologist Alain Testard of hunter-gatherers, it's called Chasseurs of hunter-gatherers, or the origins of inequality. This is a book that he quite a while ago now, but he published that. He's the late Alain Testard, that was kind of looking at the practice of storage in early hunter-gatherers communities, which was kind of at odds to the prevailing theories in anthropologies at the time. The other book that you find here on the right-hand side, I don't know if some of you had a chance to have a look at it, The Dawn of Everything, David Graeber and David Wengrow, that's really recent, so combining the competencies, the skills, of the late anthropologist David Graeber, also known for his work on debt, perhaps you have seen some of that, and the anthropologist David Wengrow, that articulate that point to the existence of different models in the development of early societies, and to kind of counter this idea of a kind of teleological, a sort of pointed direction within which we would be going in the sort of the end of history's. Francis Fukuyama's kind of very interesting but very pointed philosophical argument in a Hegelian perspective, that we are going towards a sort of an end of our evolution, but that points out based on a very specific model of economic development as well. Well, I shouldn't go to. It's a great book. I'll recommend it to you. I won't go too much into it there, because really, just the point is that I want to talk about containers, and so and the importance of that for this research here of the great work of Wang Yongping, late as well, Xiamen artist as well, linked to Xiamen Dada. Perhaps you've heard of that in the 1980s. But this is a work, he moved to Paris at some point in his career, and he had also a very great success in France as well. This is a work that he did Empire in the Grand Palais in Paris, a monumental work made with a lot of shipping containers, as well as dinosaurs, skeletons, and Napoleonian hats, to refer to French the French late 18th century and early 19th century imperial ambitions. We were just talking in aparté about shipwrecks, and these are very useful to know a little bit more about how our ancient societies connected to each other, and what they ate as well, you could say, what they consumed, not only the food, of course. And so here you have the Tang shipwreck, and this very baroque, it seems to me is probably the wrong word, but a presentation in the Museum of Asian Civilization in Singapore. Perhaps some of you have seen it. I think it's kind of more or less permanent presentation. But more generally, I think that tableware, of course, is of particular interest to me and to coastal cookings, the recipient of the food to be eaten. But the historical shipwreck also brings to mind the work of Steve Mentz, Shipwreck of Modernity, analyzing the paradigmatic transformation of a newly interconnected early modern age, so from the 15th, 16th century onwards. But he places under the sign of catastrophe, and I quote, "Reconsidering history through catastrophe requires not only new epochal name, but four: Anthropocene, Homogenocene, Thalassocene, and Naufragocene," end of quote. Mentz is associated or is kind of linked as someone who developed the ideas of a network of blue humanities, of course, and he comes from literature and literary background, but I think it's kind of spread to kind of a number of people. And I have a colleagues 2 years ago in Marseille organized a conference called Pour une histoire de l'art bleu, for a blue art history, and I could also think of one of the MACAH's regular contributors, Caroline Tank, who published a number of works on the oceanic turn in art history. But just about those four terms that I just don't, I recommend again having a look at this book if you haven't. But the Anthropocene is the one that perhaps everyone will be more familiar with. It's the one that he obviously didn't come up with. It comes from geology and so on. So it points to the industrial processes that grew exponentially and with a heightened dispersal of carbon molecules and its impact on system Earth. But the other three are kind of his kind of contribution here. The Thalassocene, so Thalassoth of his, referring to the watery world, underlining the weight of oceans in the shaping of the global era, and that, I quote, "To be oceanic remains the coastal curse of our species and our planet. Ocean-borne weather reaches its blue fingers deep into all human habitations," end of quote. And he's pointing out the fact that we've put an emphasis, human societies have placed an emphasis on their earthly abode as land-based, but the Earth, in an Earth system, you can consider the major part is liquid or watery, so it needs to be taken into account. The Naufragocene, so naufrage from a shipwreck condition, condenses these intuitions in the figure of this shipwreck, placing the emphasis on the interconnected nature of life on Earth to the planetary dimension in dialogue with Peter Sloterdijk's Scalar reflections on sphere. I shouldn't go into that, but that's 3 wonderful volumes as well. Goes from the macro, meso to micro, meso, macro scales. And there are 3 large volumes, originally published in German, of course. But you can, I'm sure you can find it in English, translated by Californians. But I'm probably also in Chinese if you prefer to read it in Mandarin. Yes, so did I... Missing one. Yes. Excellent. So that's a little bit coming from the fields, taking us, of course, with our little baskets and our containers to the market. I'll just say a few words about here. I combine kind of different perspective on markets. Here you have, again, Joachim Böckeler, sort of a 16th century early works here. The 4 elements, this is, the 4 elements as in one of 4. Here, of course, with all this fat fish, we are with water. But there are four kind of market scenes each alluding to earth, water, air, and fire. A Kleis Oldenburg, to give us a little sense of going to the Americas, and also consumption societies. This is quite large. I didn't put the dimension, but this is quite a big piece. French fries and ketchup. And the one on the bottom right, I said apocryphal. That's because the photographs is not the original. I just couldn't find somehow a good version. Although I've seen the piece myself a long time ago when it was shown in Liverpool, at TETI Liverpool, new supermarket, but it's basically like your local supermarket, so pick up your own. So I think in Liverpool it was a Tesco, if you've been to England, but here, I don't know, pick one up, 7-Eleven, and then, transport it into the gallery, and it was there like as a ready-made, basically. But, kind of pointing out to these dimensions of market spaces as they have evolved in time, from the local to the industrial, and perhaps we could also mention questions of sustainability, sustainable systems, and sustainable landscape in parallel to food systems, which is also something that is certainly of interest here. I move on to go towards the kitchen, and where the cooking takes place, where food is prepared, arranged, transformed to obtain the dish. A space of production and creation in a process that uses all the senses in the balancing of taste, smell, and the visual to be linked to the next step of presentation of the dish. I'm showing you, and of course, these are selected, of course, examples, but here is by the Spanish painter Velázquez, Christ in the house of Mary and Martha. And this is to point out something that's really, probably, I think, really interesting, is the relation between mind and body, which varies in different cultures, as does the value given to the senses. And here, in the Western tradition, there's a hierarchical distinction that long existed between mind and body, and between the senses most associated to each entities. Velázquez shows us in this distinction a particular Christian pictorial trope, in which the subject of food, market stalls, or here the kitchen, is used as a decoy for a representation of a religious story. Or, perhaps, yes, the religious story as an excuse for the artist, for the painter, to consider table matters and to enjoy, to depict them. The story here, just on a kind of a iconographical perspective, Jesus visited the house of Mary and Martha, the sisters, and while Martha looked after the kitchen, Mary listened to the word of Jesus, who stayed out of the kitchen. And Jesus praised her for doing so, for listening to her, rather than getting busy with the task at hand in the kitchen. In this perspective, the kitchen is the space of the material, embodied, lesser, ephemeral world, in contrast to the superior, eternal, spiritual world. But in a way, though, painters working with this genre of painting, and there are many examples within this context, could be seen as engaging with the material world through the back door, importing the world of the kitchen and its embodied associations into artistic production via the detour of a religious reference that gives us kind of an excuse to depict this type of subject matter. Fast forward to 2007 and the Documenta in Kassel. It's an event that takes place, a contemporary art event that takes place every 5 years in Germany since 1955. And that year it was curated by Roger Buergel, B-U-E-R-G-E-L. And among the artists present, this is really contemporary art world kind of event, you can imagine, but there was a chef, a very well-known chef, called Ferran Adrià, who is, his restaurant used to be El Bulli near Barcelona. Never been there, it's very difficult to get there, and now it's closed. It's become, I think, just a research kind of center. That's what it's called. But it was still open at the time. And so everybody was like, well, the chef he's participating as, as an artist, so everybody was like, well, what's he going to do? What kind of special kind of installation or performance is he going to do, like in a kind of, he's into the contemporary aesthetics kind of perspective. And in the end, he may even manage to surprise everyone because he said, well, no, I'm just doing my usual thing, my usual, my everyday evening. And two people, I think, could get a table at these kind of places that are overbooked, in contemporary haute cuisine, But the point was like, I don't need to transfer my skills to your world. My skills are already art. They already should be valued as contemporary art. Alors, you see, this is, I think, also at the heart of this kind of border and blurring of the borders that you have between, in the discussion, dialogue between art and food. Another example, to change gears, but still with the kitchen, I wanted to mention, the point was, who works in the kitchen, and this question of labor is important. But also, and going back, thinking of Velázquez's paintings earlier on, questions also of gender could be mentioned here. This was certainly something that was addressed by the artist Martha Rosler, the American artist Martha Rosler, in Semiotics of the Kitchen. It's a little filmed kind of television format style, mimicking kind of the conventions of the popular cooking programs. You can find this one easily online now these days, but it's kind of 6 minutes, and she goes through an ABC kind of thing with the tools of the kitchen. K is for knife, etc. But you have a look at it. It's like sort of passive aggressive. So with a knife, she's like, she's just kind of like showing, she doesn't, she can sense she doesn't want to be there, and she's questioning in that way, in this kind of aggressive but also humorous film, maybe a certain stereotypical position that could have been associated in this American context, but we could of course extend it with women in the kitchen space, and think that also could be also an interesting aspect to think with regards to chefs and so on. Generally, cooking programs are super interesting. I put the Taiwanese example here, which I really don't know, but I just discovered it quite recently. Maybe some of you or some people online are more familiar with it, but I actually look forward to getting to know more about it. And these are kind of related a little bit to the artist book, to a cookbook, sorry, which I'm going to move to in a second. But maybe a media question here might be also, okay, but that's the television cooking program, and this still exists, but of course television is changing now these days, so digital formats are also altering these, are offering new forms. So that's why I put also one reference to the mukbang traditions. I don't know if folks here are like that kind of thing, but where you can also eat with someone else who has pre-recorded themselves eating and so on. So I mean, these are all also quite, I think, interesting in this respect. But just before I move to the books, I just had to mention, of course, here with regards to the kitchen, the work of Wu Ma-li, the Taiwanese artist, and her Chijin kitchen. I mean, she also has made a number of works on flavors of empires. And she's, someone who works with socially engaged forms of practice and looking at inherited recipes and what they tell us about people's movement and people's communities. You can have a look at the quote. This is from an interview that I did with her quite a while ago now, and I've been in dialogue a little bit with her as a fan, you could say. And the little trip to Jinmen was also at her invitation. But the Chijin kitchen here, which I went to a couple of years ago, was a kitchen as a community space, really, organized in a former military base, disused military based in Kaohsiung, in Chijin, off Kaohsiung Harbor. And she points out, because she made some films and videos as well, also meeting with people there who have little shops, who do ice creams or Thai food, and how they come up to here. And they point out that, Chijin, I don't know if anybody's familiar here maybe with here, but it's kind of seen, it has a beach, so if you go there and you've never been there, you're like, well, this is kind of nice, I'll go and have, you know, a cafe and have a swim, and it's cool. But it's actually, you know, it has a working tradition, but that is both ancient, but also made of populations that have changed quite a lot with in the past decades, so that it has moved away from a sort of an idyllic. It has a very interesting history in that respect of maritime circulation. So. So that's for the kitchen. I move a little bit forward, so I have time to show you a little bit of everything. Although, yes, I just mentioned that's the latest issue of the TETI journal that we've published, Hybrid Marines. This one came out in print just last November. It will be online, but we are doing the launch later in June. So you'll be able to access all the articles if you want. I can keep folks updated. But it's a mix of art history. This one, contrary to the first one, which was on industriality, was very interdisciplinary. So you have design people, artists, photographers. But this one has a very art history. It's kind of a core group of art history publications by people like Charlotte Gould, Thierry Dufresne, and very art historians, and a number of artistic contribution, 10 artistic research pieces, which are linked to another project. I'm not talking about that today, which I'm involved at the moment, called Maritime Basel, which we're doing a little show in May when I come back with my friends and colleagues. I'm sure, you know, I'm based in Switzerland these days, so, you know, kind of think of the Alps, alpine, mountain place, not really, you know, close to the sea, but there is a port, and it's in a town called Basel, which is on the Rhine, and so it's a river port, of course, and these are very interesting, and we could make, you know, a lot of variations here. But anyway, I was pointing it out, yeah, also because my own text, my own contribution, besides spending a lot of time editing it, is specifically on those on the South China Sea hybrids, and I talk about Mali's work in there as well. But let me move to the cookbook. And so that we have time to get to the meal at some point. Well, the cookbook's really, really interesting, and I've picked up a couple of examples here. The kitchen is a space of creativity, storytelling, and encounter, and the cookbook might be seen as the tool, one of the tools in the chef's hand. It records and transmits heritage. And cookbooks are also a popular genre, so that it feels in itself. I picked one from the Peranakan heritage tradition, which is particularly interesting to me here, thinking of the South China Sea, of course. I'll skip a little bit the quote, but the quote from the author, Philippe Chia, points out how, I quote, "Peranakan cooking expresses and celebrates the exuberant hybridity that is central to Peranakan identity. Ever since the Portuguese colonial era, the southern Chinese community, the port towns have been exposed to the lifestyles of Malays from all over the archipelago, as well as the Europeans, Indians, and Arabs. And over the centuries, it was possible for these communities to learn about or be influenced by the different cooking and the ingredients and so on. It's a kind of really this encounter that you can find. On a more historical note, thinking of the region at hand, of course, thinking of the spices, the ceramics, interested in imperial and colonial connections. I'm pointing to example, very interesting example, very good example, I would say, in that respect. On the left, on your left-hand side, Eating the Empire by Troy Bickham. It's really on the 18th century. There's a whole chapter in there on 18th century British cookbooks, you know, and, you know, how you find recipes for curries. You know, there's a moment when curries become kind of available. You can buy curry powder in in London, and more of a. So the cookbooks, Bickham points out, tells us how the British imagined the world in the 18th century through what they were eating. You know, Lisa Collingham actually wrote a whole book on curry, I think, but I chose The Hungry Empire, and there's a whole recipe of some some farmers who are based in northeast India, and who were basically involved in growing poppies. So it's kind of basically involved, kind of so their stories was related to the development of the opium trade at the moment, with the dramatic stories that we know of later on. But from these kind of examples, the popular cookbook, the historian kind of focus can study, there is of course the artist cookbook. I point here to Marinetti's futurist cookbook, and the futurist kind of developed all kinds of recipes. They were like, just as they were completely against museums, maybe you've read across that, they wanted to abolish museums. So they were also Italians, they were against pasta. So they wanted to remove all pasta, and people shouldn't eat any pasta. And they come with these crazy recipes that are not necessarily edible, you could say. Some of them are. They also did, meals, etc. But, that's, we're in the 1920s, 1930s here. For photograph cookbooks, I pass on that, but more perhaps here, importantly, for my point here, maybe contemporary art cookbooks here, and there are a number I'm showing you here: preparing the kitchen, cooking, eating, cleaning up. What I want to stress about this book here is that it's a recipe. A cooking book is a recipe book of artistic and curatorial recipes and reflections. So they in this project, they have been mixing and cooking together during various exhibitions, workshops, and experiments that were developed as part of Homeworks, a 2-year program in Stockholm. But I think if you have cooking is important here, but you don't just cook ingredients to feed yourself. You can also have an extended notion of cooking, to take forms involving new elements that might be related to cooking, but might not be edible per se, so that you can cook a space, a history, and so on. In their case, they did both. So they did some actual cooking in the kitchen, but they were also cooking labor relationships or gender relations or imagination. So I think that's a very interesting way of extending research into culinary matter. Sorry, there's a couple of examples here of the book and the way that they documented it. I mentioned here the Indonesian group Bakudapan, whom I'm hoping to meet maybe next month. One of their projects, Retelling Spices, Sensi Spices, it's a woman study group on food based in Yogyakarta. And I put it here because I could put it in many places, I think. But this project they did in Tokyo, they did the zine as well. So a publication, right? But a sort of DIY, easily publishable type of zine where it comes from the fan-based publications, right? The fanzine, the zines are there. So as an example, they're here. And the last one that I have here on a video format was mentioned to me by Jason Wee. It's from Singapore, the Grey Projects. He's an artist, poet, curator, and I think he made this whole series of projects during the pandemic. And that's looking at the mutation, but not mutation is not the word, you shouldn't choose that word, the circulation and transformation of traditional recipes in Southeast Asia. And they made some videos you can find online as well, interviewing people in their kitchen who were cooking traditional recipes. And I think that's something that food historians do, of course, and anthropologists. So they look at, a recipe or maybe a specific source, a specific ingredient, and how it's used over a geographical territory, and how it has variations or how it has similarities, and what that tells us about people, about communities, and and their histories. And that is also, I think, really, really interesting. I would like to mention just on this last example of book of book and artist book and the work. A project that we did in Switzerland, in Bern, called Book Harvesting. Also, I did that with Anne-Laure. I'll try to summarize it. So, but we were invited by this cafe, which is also cafe arts place, but there's a cafe there on the right-hand side, and they sell stuff, and there's a little kitchen, but they also have a really interesting library, or rather bookshop, because you can buy the books. And they invited us to do a project there, and with food and books basically, and we suggested that we could invite people to come and make a harvest in the bookshop, from which we could make some dishes. And so we asked people to select a number of books, and then to collect some notes, and we had some instructions, some suggestions of how they could transform it into an actual edible form. Because you have a book. Some of his books are about food, but some of his books are not at all about some contemporary art in other medium. And I had suggested 4 paths. We had suggested 4 paths, 5 actually: visualization, analogy, translation, rhymes, and incantation. Like incantate, but so these were some of the points that people could play with. We had a meal, of course. For the first one, we had 2 events basically, and for the first one, we had cooked some dishes as examples. We kept the notes and put it on the wall, and it was stayed there for a month. And after which we came back. An example of what these dishes could be. This is one that I did, which is this onion tart. I did it, kind of in a classic French way, but it was all to represent this book called Atlas of Aspect Change, and it was all about how an onion could also represent layers of cosmological imaginaries, and I talked about it. And we asked everyone to do the same thing, of course. When we had the books that people had selected presented in the cafe for a month, and when we came back, we came with the idea, so the different people came, which was not so easy, I suppose, on the practical side for the curators in you here today. Things go differently, as you might expect. But anyway, we came up with some pizza dough, and so as pages that people could use as a page to represent the books that they had chosen, and so what you see here are some of the results. Each of these on the right hand side represents specific books that people had selected. I wanted to really go and present the one that I chose myself, but I know I shouldn't go on too long. But I worked on that on the typo sandwich, which is what you see on the left-hand side, which is inspired by the work of Jimmy Durham, the late Jimmy Durham, the artist, he's musing on sandwiches, and it was a play on the book as a sandwich. And what you see on the left-hand side is, the white page is provided by the dough, but also mozzarella, while typography was the oyster mushroom, beetroot, and black garlic. And images, there's a small image here on the bottom left, were made of potatoes. And I really wanted to read all this from Breadcrumb, but I know I shouldn't. Jimmy Durham, A Concise History of Sandwich. So it's another books called In Breadcrumb, Art in Your Sandwich, published by Onomatope. And it's a book with artist recipes and so on. And the first one is just this text, basically, by Jimmy Durham, where he talks about sandwiches, the history of the sandwich, and what you can put inside and what you can put outside. You can have a look. I'll just give you my reflections on it. It's a really interesting text because it's talking about sandwiches, but also the art world at the same time. And in a way, the discussion on the sandwich reads like a humorous variation in art historical discourse, looking at origins, provenance, connoisseurship, and style, relation between form and content, social context, and ultimately, as a piece in itself, a conceptual art piece, one could say. It revisits the question, what is art? You know, can a sandwich be art? Or is it just the lettuce inside it and the bread is like the frame and outside? You know, that's not the art. I mean, the sandwich. I mean, the art. You get the point, right? So I think, you know, it's a variation, a very funny and witty variation on this kind of ongoing question, which I've already put to the fore of, you know, how the question of what art is, or in John Baldessari's variation, what is painting, following on the path opened by Marcel Duchamp's ready-made in the early 20th century, this bottle rack on the right-hand side, and derived in an essay by the philosopher Jacques Derrida, based on a quote from the French painter Paul Cézanne regarding the truth in painting. That's the title of the book. It's in Cézanne's correspondence, and it's a whole essay in aesthetics. But Derrida develops looking at what he calls the parergon, or again, this idea of what is in the work and what is on the side of the work and what is kind of outside of the work. And I think, you know, when we talk about art and food, I think that's kind of certainly an aspect that's interesting, that you have artists who are moving the boundaries of what we could consider an art and not an art form. Just going back also to the point that we were making about Adrien Ferrat, right? I'm sure you're all starving now and looking forward to the end of this presentation. Just a couple of examples about the meal, of course, which is, you know, kind of perhaps the most visible sometimes aspect of culinary art practices. And you have here, as an example, the work of Rekrit Tiravanya, who is an important historical figure, Thailand artist from Thailand in this respect. And I mentioned as a reference, I don't know if you've come across this field before. But from the 1990s, we talked about relational aesthetics. It's a term that was coined and made popular by the French art critic Nicolas Bourriaud and curator Nicolas Bourriaud. Although, as you could say, I mean, if you could think of that earlier relational aesthetics, and of course, the book is not, you know, just about food at all. There's all kinds of relational aesthetics that you can think of, but food is one of them. And in that book, he talks particularly about the work of Rekrit Tiravanya, who is someone who makes, you know, he has varied practice, but he does make soups and put them in a galley and say, well, you know, that's the work, you know, come and have some soup, you know, and so the work is no longer the sculpture that you look at. Even a ready-made may be the bottle rack. I mean, in the case of Duchamp, but it's the actual maybe relation, or what's the word I want, the moment and connection that you have with other people in that space, in that given moment, that becomes the work, and it has, of course, a performative aspect. In relation to this meal and relational aesthetics, we are moving away from maybe the kind of historical banquets, both in French here, but the one on the left-hand side focus on the banquet in the tradition, in the imperial China, and the right-hand side in royal France. So there's a whole history of like lavish meal, and these are the ones that we often know more about from written documentation, because you have, you know, some archives on it. Banquets can be found, of course, and are a fun way to make a contemporary work. I'm using an example from Lei Sato here, who is an artist who uses kind of a banquet, but not in that kind of royal imperial tradition. Here you have kind of eat with your hands. She also has like very intertextual references for all these works. So the work that she made here was a reference to 1,000 Nights, the Arabian tale. So it's kind of really kind of, you know, poetic as well. But at the end, I mean, everything is eaten. I think the first work that she made for the School of Fine Arts in Paris was made of sandwiches, actually, and at the end there only remained breadcrumbs, as in the title of that book. An important aspect here, but I mentioned, I don't go into the full text here, but you can find it online, is the question of the practices of hospitality, so of the idea of taking care of. I think also that a lot of the artists working, many artists working with food are interested in that. This is from a research group based at the School of Art in Grenoble, in France, with my colleagues Katia Schneller and Simone Frangi, and they talk a lot here about interrelation, about critical formats. We're in a European context, so for them it's also about decentering the gaze, by who participates and who was excluded maybe in a practice. So it poses all this question of what makes a community and who might not be part of this community and why and so on. And but it's quite layered. So you can also you can find online. Going towards the end, I should probably move towards a conclusion. But another example from TETI is an event that we did in 2022 from this mobile soils book, Scrambled in Whip Oils. That year, the Ruan Grupa, the Indonesian collective based in Jakarta, was invited to curate the Documentaine Castle, and we didn't make it to Castle for sure. But the idea that they had for the curation of that huge show filtered to Zurich. The theme was compost, so it was all about making compost. And I asked all the authors in mobile soils. There's 18 texts in that book. It's the first book that we did with TETI Press in 2021 to give me some ingredients that they thought corresponded to their text. And from that, we made a meal that we shared at the On-Curating space in Zurich. Another example is a collaboration with the artist Maya Minder, so an artist, a Swiss-based artist, with also some Korean heritage, who works with food, and this we did at the embassy in Paris on the theme of aquatic devolution. It was in parallel to the symposium organized by Ewen Chardonnay, More Than Planet, so it was kind of eating a conference, maybe, I don't know, something like that. That was the idea. To close the loop, so to speak, going back to our little tour in Shanghai and Hangzhou, at the end of this tour, we asked everyone, we organized a food club, and we asked everyone to come and eat with us and bring a dish of their choice. People were really kind of they did participate, and people brought all kinds of stuff, and that you had some fruits and some apples. I made some peach tea, but we also had Coke and some street food and some industrial stuff. So and everyone told a story about this food and what that meant for them in their contemporary, to represent curated nature, which was also the theme there. Some of these pieces that we made, we had a display of 8 works. I don't go into them, but just to mention here, on the left-hand side, Secret Message, alluding to Kung John Chen. Sorry, I'm butchering that, but you might recognize the peach blossom fan from 1699, moment of transitioning from the Ming to the Qing dynasty, and variation on peaches, basically. And on the right-hand side, more of a robotic aspect, alluding to the Uncanny Valley by Masari Mori. Not going into the Uncanny Valley today, but robots, when they start looking too much like you, it becomes freaky or uncanny. But just the one that finalized this was An Orchard, after Michael Craig Martin. That's the title of the piece. So in which we proposed that this ball on this piece of furniture is not a ball on a piece of furniture, but is an orchard. Just like Michael Craig Martin in this conceptual piece from 1973 pointed out that what you see on there is not a glass of water, but is really an oak tree. So a form of transubstantiation, sorry, a conceptual piece in many ways. I do have some words of conclusion, which are, but I thought maybe through this journey that perhaps we could invite you, I invite our colleagues, if you felt like it, to maybe play with this idea of recipe in its expanded format. That is to maybe, if you wanted to try your hands at writing a little recipe to cook a space. It doesn't have to be a coast. This is kind of a play on I'm contributing to, as I was saying, to a journal in a research journal in these days, and I've been writing a little coastal recipe. But you could choose another space that you want. It could be a mountain, or it could be a river, or it could be a table. It could be something much smaller, and to write a little. It could be a short recipe. I have some suggested guidelines. So maybe to select the territory, maybe to select the modes of cooking. Do you want to boil it? Do you want to fry it? Or should it be raw? I didn't get into the raw and the cook today because I thought it would be just too much. But maybe next time I put some Lévi-Strauss in that. And also very interesting, the raw and the cook with regards to Chinese and Western perception of food. And free, maybe select a condiment if appropriate, or side dish, and why this enhances the particular nature of your dish, and to name the recipe. Yeah. What do you think? You don't have to do it, but if you want, you could play with it. If you want, we can. Some people want, we can share this if you have a few minutes, or you can also, if you're feeling you can also just send it to me if you want to share it more privately. I'd be curious to hear your mind. So I stop here. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. First of all, a big round of applause to Professor. Wow, yeah, really very exciting and such a feast of food for thought. And I thought it's a really interesting idea to, cook or make a recipe with food that resemble a book. Really, really interesting and conceptually and intellectually really opened up my eyes. So I think this is a great activity. Why not everybody maybe take 3 minutes or something, do a recipe, and we'll
It can be very tentative. You don't have to. It can be very playful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is a really wonderful activity. Yeah, we'll take 3 minutes. You can discuss, you can work on your own, and then we'll come back and entwine that with the questions and discussions. Yeah.
So just basically, if you're walking around Hong Kong,
Yes.
and to see all the fish markets, and have you tried all the tasty food around Hong Kong?
Oh no.
The suburban and new territory.
Yeah, because when I came. A little bit, but of course there's
I'm just curious, since you are here, because from your research, basically it's more Singapore.
No.
Shanghai,
No.
Shanghai just a little bit, and I mean Southeast Asian coastline. So Hong Kong and the Taiwan Koi is what the that area, the southern coastal line. I'm just curious, so I wonder what will you be doing?
Yeah, so thank you very much. Yeah, no, I'm really hoping to crisscross around the South China Sea. So I am very ignorant, of course. I'm in Hong Kong. I've been a little bit, but there's a lot, of course. I stayed in Lingnan some years ago, actually. So I was also seeing a little bit some of the vast barbecue sites on the coast there. Yes, I mean, last summer I'm interested in the southern Chinese coast, so I went to Xiamen, Fuzhou, a little bit these places there. Taiwan, yes, but I'm also hoping to discover new places. So I'm going to Vietnam next week. This is really new for me. So and it's quite interesting. If I've gathered that I'm French, so. It's interesting here to think of the dark side of modernity from the French perspective here, and also I mean I've been to Yogyakarta before, but I haven't met this food group. So, but I'm quite interested in looking at Indonesian and Malaysian histories. But yeah. Maybe I have to come back to tell you more about that because I still don't know so much. It's about these places. It's fair to say. One place that would be also very interesting, but I haven't decided on a good strategy yet. I have a contact now, maybe, but the Philippines, of course, because also, talking about crossroads, they're really interesting. So I'll see. Maybe I try, but I'm recently got in touch with a Swiss translator whom I'm hoping to contact, but I need more connections before I make the path there, because I don't end up just on my own in the streets. And it's nice, but and you learn things, of course. But it's good also to have a cicerone, as we would say in Italian, a guide as well. Yeah. But thank you. Yeah.
I'm sorry that I'm asking this because I'm glad to be your guide if you come to Hong Kong again. And I don't know if the university know that I have produced a few cookbooks in Hong Kong on Hong Kong history. And also I'm research on the cultural heritage, the Hakka people, the Danga people, that's mean the fishermen, floating boat people, the earthen people, the things, so that if you're interested, do connect. And I will send you my books,
I'd love to do that.
I don't know how should I send it to you, though. But it will. I have to post it. Have to post it. Post. It's the
I'll give you
real
my,
book.
Okay,
maybe I give it to you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, but
What's the name of the book? Sorry.
I'm Crazy Granny. Evelina Lang, and I used to teach art history too at university. Yes.
Well, I should.
But when I'm retiring, I started to go into the intangible cultural heritage of Hong Kong.
Right.
And so I'm going to print a book in Takalo about Philippines.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so,
you
and
seem like
Vietnamese.
the right contact for me.
So Vietnam too. So if you're interested, I'll be your guide.
Thank
Okay?
you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Wow, that's really wonderful. Actually, anyone would like to share your recipe? Right? We can have a little discussion. Maybe Professor Chi, you want to take a seat? Yeah, we can have a little discussion if you are still working on your recipe. Yeah, I do have a lot of questions, Professor Chi. Yeah, take a seat, please. And well, very, very enlightening, I think, discussion and a very broad review of, intellectual histories and histories of food and international exchanges. And I think it's really fascinating to think about the term that you coined, trans-industriality, and, in relation to this histories of changes of food production that connected, people and places and goods and our basically the history of different modes of production. And with, because you show this photo of your, visiting Hangzhou and Shanghai and then going to this vertical farm that, has this soilless, technology for bringing up plants, and so really interesting. And I would like to for you to share a little bit more maybe about this idea of technology and its impact on this food web and whole idea of how food is made, how we consume food, etc. and etc. Maybe even a little bit about colonial histories of food and ingredients and spices. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. I think maybe an example would be interesting. I think there are quite a lot of artists that have and artistic practices that have really insightful and interesting perspective and approaches that try to rethink, the way that we organize our food systems and maybe propose alternate ways of organizing the systems. And in the first issue of a journal, the TETI journal, there is a text by Tim Boycott, who is a part of Time's Up. Time's Up is a collective that thinks about the future because they think that time's up, and they do scenarios quite a lot. Propose scenarios to construct maybe alternate paths for the future. He has a text, quite a long text in there, on permaculture trade routes. And it comes from a discussion that also we had. He was participating in the Kochi Biennale on soil sustainabilities. And it was all taking place also this year. It was 2 years ago, last year, 2 years ago, and this year as well. But he's in his text. He's really looking at. He's thinking about what were the old trade routes. That linked the spice routes that went from India to Europe to, of course, East Asia and beyond, and how they have shaped our world today, and considering the environmental pressure that we are tackling in the present, are there ways to think alternatively about them? And it points to it's quite a layered text. I mean, but one aspect, one bit in the text is that he talks about sustainable trade, sailing trade, you could say, which is kind of a small thing, obviously, but it does exist. That you have a number of businesses, really. It's two types, I suppose, but one is more like activist type of organization, and one is really more business trade that try to move goods with sustainable vessels, so typically sailing vessels, rather than large cargo ships. Although I don't know, the big polluting cargo ships, I think the big companies are also, I understand that maybe people would disagree with that, but are trying to also look into changing their modes of their energy models. But they're not there yet, for sure. That's for sure. But so that's an interesting. And so in the business types, there are some examples of people who move quite typically, kind of quite high value type of goods, expensive coffee or alcohol, liquors that you can, because obviously it takes more time. It's going to be more expensive if you move it that way. So that's one aspect there that I think is very interesting. For me, perhaps the kind of slightly dark side of it, the one with the problem with the models for the ships, is also very intriguing, and might be a point that there was an argument that the British art critic for The Guardian, Jay Rayner, is no longer the Guardian because he was writing for The Observer and they changed, and now he's writing for the Financial Times, so he must have gone to another side. But anyway, he was saying, well, I think he wrote a book called I'm a Greedy Customer. It's not the title, but he points out, you have like with certain, populations that need to be fed, and so how do we balance kind of sustainable production and kind of sustenance for a large entity? And so in that respect, then I'm sure people will have different opinions in that, but the question of industries or farming, large or to middle scale, are become very interesting. So I think there's one side. Also, there's kind of a return to nature, and there's some really interesting artists working there who say, well, I know a Chinese artist who is doing a PhD here in Hong Kong, whose practice revolves around going back to the farm, basically, and I think there's quite a number of things there. So I'm sorry for a long story, but I think both sides are interesting. The more kind of let's go more, reduce the size, be more local, be more with our community, and I think that resonates nicely with a number of artists. And then the kind of industrial model, Scala strategic discussion is also interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to collect a few questions, maybe from the floor here and online, from our partner, Taiwan Nanyang Jiao Tong University. So any questions here? Yeah, please. Oh, wait till the mic.
If I want to write something about Chinese artistic cuisines, And do you have some suggestions, like I should find a reference first, or I have to figure out my research questions first, or I have to do the field work first?
Okay, could you hold on just one moment? So one more question from online. Do you have a specific angle in bringing in the new evolutionary histories into our work on global art history? I think this is somewhat related. Do you have a specific angle in bringing in the new evolutionary histories into our work on global art history? Mm-hmm.
I mean, a recommendation for your fees for your research. I would choose, if it were me, I would choose the object that you want to look at. So so that you know, China's huge. So and there are loads of types of cuisines, and it has a long history. So where are you going to narrow it down? So maybe I just met someone who was who was presenting some work in Chinese in Zurich. They have a festival in fermentation in the northeast. Okay. And so that's you can say, oh, I'm going to look at this festival and for fermentation, and then have a broader discussion about fermentation, which is a huge, also big theme in art and food practices at the moment. So, but or it could be, or it could be, or an artist that works specifically with that. I would narrow it down, maybe. And for the evolution, if I understand correctly the question, I think harking back to me referring to Weigro and Graeber, perhaps. One thing that I've been interested in this work are inversions, and it's part of the title of my own contribution to hybrid marine. So inversion, expansions. So in that way, I would say that yes, contrary to following maybe, well, not contrary, but no, it's not contrary. It's part of, there are quite a number of people who are doing this at the moment, but okay, let's move from the sort of maybe kind of quite linear path that we had, that also, it was a path that excluded quite a lot of folks, and I think, maybe I should, it's a good question. I pointed to it when we talk about, gender, or we could also maybe trans practices or so, which I didn't go into it, but our ways of thinking also rethinking models or canons in art history. And I think food does that as it does craft. I wanted to go more in between that, but there's something like, oh, this is craft, it's like weaving and so on, rather than art. But feminist practices have challenged this, and very, very successfully, these assumptions in the 60s, 70s. And we have great works that are really great, but that are not painting and sculpture. I love painting and sculpture. I'm writing a book about painting, but these are also wonderful. And so food also does that in many ways, and it enables a decentering or taking a step aside, or really an inversion. Possibly we change the things on the hand. And expansions. I didn't have time, but I'm thinking of the word of Rosalind Krauss, sculpture in the expanded field. That might be important for contemporary art here. But she's talking that you get food as a way of doing that, and geographically too, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really fascinating. Any other questions from the floor? Or if you would like to share a recipe that you just wrote, or like a food engagement experience or a cooking experience you had, that would be great as well. Yeah. Well, we are, okay, yeah. We'll collect 2 questions at one time, so.
Thank you for the sharing. I'm just wondering, because this idea is quite new for me, at least in Hong Kong. Like when we walk around galleries and museums, we don't see a lot of perhaps artworks or artworks about food as a subject, or using food as a kind of way to like engage audience, etc. So I'm wondering, is there any like examples that you come across maybe in Europe that museums has contributed to using food as an art form? Because at the beginning you mentioned that we are focusing a lot on visual and hearing, right? But as a sense of taste, we often neglect that. So I'm wondering, like, are there any good examples that you could share with us?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I think my sense is that it's been growing, particularly, certainly a lot in Switzerland, but also in France and more, in other places as well. But of course, maybe the one that is important, I don't want to say seminal, but the historically important one that I mentioned here was the work by Tiravagnard, the Recré Tiravagnard with the soup, because it's really, this is really kind of you find it in the art history books and so on. He had a huge retrospective in the one that I saw. It was in Hamburg, 2 years, no, in Berlin, sorry, 2 years ago or something. So this is in a big museum, you know. It's not just the food, because he has various types of practices, but including ping pong. The main thing was like about ping pong, but food is one of them. So he would be, I think, a big references. And then I don't know. I mean, about the smell, the work with perfumes. Elodie Pong, for instance, she's a Swiss artist. She works with perfumes in the room. And then the other examples that I showed here are more from independent artists, you could say. But Wu Mali also, she's also someone who, if you want someone notorious, very well known, she had a big retrospective in Kaohsiung 2 years ago, was it? Also, her practice is not just about food. It's socially engaged art, but it's really part of it. And you find it that was in Kaohsiung Museum, you know. And I think so. But I do think there's also a relation, you know, that you have more artists who work with it and who might do events. So the on-curating event, what we did is more an independent kind of setting, right? But that, you know, it kind of progressively changes also the nature of what is might be shown in museums. That's the examples that I'm at the top of my head. But yeah, I do think it's an interesting development. Yeah, but and perhaps something that I haven't said, but it's also quite personal for me. But we have this study group on transindustriality, so I'm really interested in technology, and we're living in a paradigm moment of technological transformation, and so we have to think of, you know, digital extensions and how we're becoming like cyborgs of flesh and chips, and maybe, you know, this interest in embodied experience, heritage, traditions is a way to balance. It might be a way also to resist it, but at very least a way to balance. Certainly part of a picture, I think, I would say, to revisit this attention to embodied experience. But of course, it has relation to performance art and so on. And phenomenology, for philosophical thinking. But I think it's related, nevertheless. But thank you for your question.
Yeah, that's all really, really wonderful insights. Do we have another question from the floor? Because I have a lot of questions. If not, I'll take the advantage of, you know, asking questions.
Now it's working. Just a very simple question. What's the most artistic food you've eaten in the last month? Or in this trip? Or not necessarily artistic, but could also be surprising. It could also be like a interesting experience.
I would say it's a bit tentative, but I have a kind of writing and cooking project out of my current more South China interest, which is kind of around the figure of Koxinga. How do in Qianqinggong?
Qianqinggong. You mean in Palace Museum?
No. Koxinga, the pirate.
For the pirate, I'm not sure. Maybe everybody here can help.
Qianqinggong.
Oh, Zheng Chenggong. Oh, yeah, yes.
Sorry. And so since it was, it was a bit, since it was also, so I'm planning to a couple of, a story that involved meals with it, and so I kind of took advantage of a New Year to try a little bit out some tentative ones. But it's still very in its infancy, but I'm hoping I can combine both as well. So we had a bit of a food club for for the year of the horse, and so invited a lot of people to bring some dishes for that. That was it, I think. He's a really interesting figure who kind of took over from his father at the moment of a change of dynasties in the 17th century. So yeah, he's an interesting. He ended up in Taiwan because he didn't make it as a Ming supporter. Long story short, but and I think it's quite an interesting. Yeah, so I'm trying some variations with that. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a comment from our online audience that I'd just like to acknowledge. So this comment is about your talk reminds of Melody Jue's Wild Blue Media, which sees ocean as a form of media. Food, recipe, and the network underneath are also different forms of media. I think that's very, very insightful. And I was actually just thinking about this notion and concept of cooking, right? And tasting food, and this idea of, because food and culinary process, right? It required gathering ingredients, right? Thinking about what you would like to eat. I think everybody here is probably thinking about what were you going to eat for dinner, for a Friday dinner, and
coming soon.
Yeah, it is very sort of a sensational process, but you also show this rich sort of interaction with intellectual history, right? And with this entanglement with thinking and writing about art, right? This sort of disciplinary. I think that is really fascinating. Thinking about this history of sandwich, this book that you showed, right? Thinking about what is on the food, what is inside, what is on the side, what is outside, what is inside. And I think that is really fascinating because it really sort of gives us an alternative approach, thinking about how we view art, right? We oftentimes mark or label what is foreground, what is middle ground and background, and maybe we can sort of think about the boundary blurring there, right? And even for our own writing, maybe we can think about how we can sort of re-envision and pick our ingredients and think about, maybe we can put something else on the outside, or what is inside, or how we can exchange. So I have maybe a question for you on how this rich body of research have inspired your own writing or looking at art or scholarship.
Yeah, thank you very much for this really insightful points, and thank you for the subsurface reference. That's really interesting too. Yeah, it's a good question, and for me, this is also a personal note. Is that my cap is that of an art historian, which I've been doing for a while. But this project is kind of leaning towards artistic research, so that the outcome also might. So artistic research places the emphasis on process as well. Some of the little sculpture, these are very Duchampian, Boîte-en-Valise projects. They were a reference to the kind of poetics assemblage. The surrealists did like this collage as well with objects that I try to play with. So for me, it's kind of a new road as well. So really also trying to see if I can change the format. It's not saying that I won't maybe also do something more. Certainly, I keep the art history in me as well, but I'm kind of interested as well in exploring that route, but also in meeting other people with interdisciplinary knowledge. I think maybe next year we can do also maybe something. Bringing different people with different ideas together for maybe a conference or a publication, and maybe I since you mentioned blurring, I had a sort of kind of bit of an opening, which is also pretty tentative, but it's because it's around clouds. So I've been. This is this book by Hubert Damisch, French art historian, but it's a theory of clouds. It's all about clouds. But the subtitle goes for a history of painting. So it's history of painting, but going through clouds. It's really related to Western Italian art history, and in particular, he's really looking at a work that I just saw for the first time in my life last month, 2 months ago in Parma, because of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. It's a cupola, so it's a wonderful Manierist, but early Baroque, basically, painting full of clouds. I didn't put it in the end. But the point that it's a really interesting book, and the last part is all about Chinese painting as well. Very interesting. But the point about the clouds, keeping with the Europeans, was that he's pointing out, well, you have this new system of representation that comes up in the 14th, 15th century. So it's all about perspective and how you put three-dimensional space into two-dimensional space. And the cloud is kind of used as an extension of that space, of that system in the 16th century. But cloud, as Dimesh points out, kind of negates or blurs the boundary of this visible perspective space because it escapes in its evanescence what the mathematical system of the Renaissance perspective space was trying to do. And so I find that, it's kind of, and then he points out, what are the implications for thinking of what painting is about more generally. And the example that you have here on top is from a 19th century Japanese artist, but of course he really talks about the clouds in the traditional landscape Chinese tradition in this last part. But I put a book here. Sorry, it's a little book by called "The Cloud: 10 Ways to Prepare It." And this collection of this publisher, and specifically this collection, they have this series of, the Camembert, 6 ways to prepare as the Fighting Bull, 8 ways of doing this. And this one is also, usually it's kind of like you can kind of grasp what is going to be eaten, but this one is all about clouds, and one of the person who's there is a writer and culinary critique from, she's French, but she's Franco-Japanese. And it's all about, thinking how clouds were used. Don't forget to send me a message to...
I'll just have to go
yeah.
to...
No, I'd love to talk to you.
My need
yeah.
is like the toilet.
Sorry, no problem.
I'll come back.
So I think this cloud, just to point out, that kind of resonate with this blurring and opening there. What you have here on the right-hand side, if you're wondering about that, goes back to maybe this question that I was asking about. It's called The Spirit in Culinary Art. It's a historical book by someone who is a historical figure in Western art history, very known for his works on connoisseurship based on style. But the spirit in culinary art is all going back to this idea of mind and body and idea. But there's a book, a famous book in French legal story called The Spirit of the Laws by Montesquieu in the preceding century. So he's revisiting this and saying, well, we can look at a cooking tradition and we can find a spirit in it. Not just what we eat, again, this idea that it's, but there might be something more to it. And I would just say that's great, and maybe also keep the experiences. I think maybe for a lot of what I see, art that I see in artists and working is have this dual component. Sorry for a long answer.
Absolutely. I think this is so amazing. I think I can keep the conversation go on and on and on. Is this the time that we have to conclude, or? Yeah, Lemon, your call, or Elaine? One more question?
Dinner time.
Yeah, sure.
Well, because our students, they are, trying to be professional curators. I'm just wondering, maybe as curators, when we are curating exhibitions like this with profound understanding of food and profound understanding of art, so how can we manage to do the good balance that after the exhibition that our audience would remember the art as well as remember the food?
Yes,
instead
right.
of just enjoying the food without remembering.
Yes, no, that's a very good point. And actually, I remember just a story. So not I wasn't curating this, but it was a friend of mine was co-curating an event in a village in the Alps, and we had there was one artist, Paloma Ayala. She made a piece. She works a lot with food, etc. But in the spur of a moment, it all happened so fast that we only got. They only got, well, I mean, also my fault, only some modest documentation of the work, and I think that was, that was a bit of, a bit of sadness, because that's an aspect just like the performance art, and you have maybe touched upon the story of how photography got into the good books of contemporary art through performance art, for instance. Because, I'm not going another story, but I think this documentation can be a way. And just like photographs, maybe I continue on that. Books are good for that because for a photographer, a book publication is almost like an exhibition in a way that it isn't for a painter, I think. You could say maybe it's for someone who works with food. Same thing. It's different taste. Well, it's a bit different. Okay, it's a bit different. But you do have a genre in itself that is the cookbook. That is maybe an interesting extension. And perhaps just like on a side note of this question, I think it's also maybe for curating. But certainly, it's something that I found useful or interesting is the fact that you can do an art event without. With this medium, without having to convince like a whole gallery to give you the space. You can do something much more, minutiae on the moment, and so it's more flexible. But yeah, you do want to document it nicely, because otherwise, well, no one knows about it, of course, or less people know about it because it has less exposure. So that's a really good point. But yeah, maybe.
Thank you so much. I think this is the first time I fully recognize the potential of how the sensational can be so close to intellectual. Yeah, and I love the Hubert Damisch book on the clouds, and there's the wonderful Chinese painting by Miao Ren and Mi Fu reference in the book. Cloudy mountains, yeah, highly recommend everybody, yeah. And I always thought that there's some kind of interrelationship connection between clouds and marshmallows. Yeah, and well...
there's probably one, I can't remember, there's probably one in there.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. I think everybody is probably ready for dinner, and yeah, we will close our event on this note. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. And thanks to everyone online. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor G. Thank you.
Yeah, if you guys still have a few minutes, let's join us for a group photo. Yeah, put it like the documentary. Otherwise, we cannot remember you. Yes. Just to, it takes a few minutes if you want to join us for a group photo. Thank you. Just quick. Join us here. Before you have food. Oh, okay.